Hello again. This is Mr. Failer. I wanted to take some time to discuss the research and writing process. So for SA2, there is that research component, SA2 and 3, and research and writing may be new to you. So I wanted to just go over the process and sort of thinking about what the end result is and keeping the task in perspective so that it's not so daunting. And then in a separate lecture, I'll go into more detail about essays 2 and 3 and what's required on them. So this part one, I guess you could say, is in general, the research and writing process. So what you're doing when you're doing research and how you turn that into a finished composition or a finished essay. So this PowerPoint will be available for you to review. And basically, I'm taking selections from the assigned readings. So I'm going to be looking at chapters 2, 3, and 4 in these lectures. All right, so a research project is just that. It's a project. So that means you can't do it all in 1 or 2 sittings. It's something that you work on over a long period of time, and you do a little bit at a time when your mind is fresh and you have energy, uh, and you're really looking at things and analyzing things and deciding what you want to use and what you don't want to use, how it relates to the overall topic that you're addressing and what you're trying to show. So, because it's a project, you have to be your own project manager. So think about what you'll need in terms of time, resources, where are you going to work, um, when are you going to work. You really need to create a schedule, because if you just sort of do research when you have the time, you're not really going to get it done, because there are always things in life that sort of get in the way, things that you want to do now, and you say, well, I'll do some research later. The problem is that research always takes longer than you think it's going to take. The whole project always takes longer than you think. So it's very important to commit time every day or every few days or every weekend. Whenever you have that time, you need to schedule it, block it off, and really devote your energy to it. So think of when the due date is and schedule back from that due date so that you know, okay, I have 10 days left, I have 1 week left, I have 4 days left. So what can I do in that period of time? If you wait until 4 days before it's due, it's not going to be a good result. So a research project is half research, half composition. So you're going to do a lot of work before you can even sit down and write anything. And the composition process is basically arranging and reporting on the work that you've done. So if you don't do the work, you're not going to have anything to write. And if you put the work off, you're not going to have time to write. So it's very important that when you're planning this project, that you think, okay, we have 3 or 4 weeks left, 3 weeks left. So what can I do week one? Where do I want to be? Where do I want to be at the end of week two? And then where do I want to be at the end of week three when I have to turn it in? And this is an assignment, really, I think, that can be done in 3 weeks, if you plan, if you take the time to plan. So, plan for interruptions, create a schedule, have a plan B. So, what happens if your computer, something happens to your computer? Can you go to a public library? Can you borrow a computer? Can you use someone else's computer? You need to have a plan B, because in an online course and in college, technology is rarely an acceptable excuse, because technology is your responsibility as the student. Um, Having time, making time. Also, back up your work. Have a flash drive or some sort of, use the cloud storage that's available to you as a student, but save things so that you can access them later, so that you don't have everything in one place that, if something happened to your computer, you wouldn't be able to access your work. So it's very important that you take responsibility for being a custodian of your work. And also, as you're doing research, you want to keep records, make records so that you're not fishing back through and trying to figure out where that thing was that you read. You you could have a legal yellow legal pad and you just jot down some facts about research that you've done. If you think might use a good source, make a note of it. Um, Write down enough information where you can find it again quickly and you can access the page numbers quickly. So, don't do a lot of work and then just sort of let it blow away in the wind, and then you have to do that work all over again when it comes time to use it. So, thinking ahead, being organized will save you a lot of time. All right, so let's say you get into Galileo, you're on the internet, and you're looking for sources. So the trick to gathering sources is not just reading everything that you come across. You want to preview and scan. You want to look things over and decide whether they're suitable for your purposes. And there are different ways that we can do this. If you're going to take time to read something, that's a commitment. And you know that time is precious when you're doing research. So if you're going to commit an hour to reading a journal article, make sure that that journal article contains information that you need. Now, you can do this by reading the abstract. The nice thing about journal articles on Galileo, scholarly journal articles, is that you can access the abstract, which basically summarizes the most important information. You don't want to cite from the abstract, but you can read the abstract and decide, is this something I want to read? You can flip through and look at charts and graphs and see if the statistics that are in the paper are something that you think you might be able to use. Another thing you can do is just read the introduction and the conclusion. Um, that's a good way of getting a lot of quotes without having to read the entire essay. If you're using other types of information, you could use a similar process by just reading the beginning and the end, or reading the first few sentences of each paragraph, looking for any um, pictures or charts, anything that gives you a clue that this might contain something useful to me. So at the beginning of the research process, you'll do a lot of just reading, just educating yourself about your topic. But once you narrow your topic down and you know exactly what you're looking for, be discerning with your time. Only read the things that look like they might give you something that you can use. Now, what are the tools that we use when we do research? The internet, of course. You can search, Google or some other, method of just going through the internet and seeing what you can find. You have to be really careful with that because the internet is hit or miss. There's a lot of really bad information on the internet. There's a lot of unreliable information. So you can't just take the first three things that you find. Um, a library is useful. Librarians are very useful. They love to help people. So if you have a library at your home institution, or even a public library, they can give you good advice about where to find things in the library. Online databases. So if you go into Galileo, you'll find that they have a lot of databases like EBSCOhost and ProQuest and other databases where you can look for these really good, rich sources that otherwise you might have to pay for. If you have to pay for an article on the internet, it might cost you $30 just for a boring journal article, but you can read it for free using Galileo. Now, this is where we need to talk about primary, secondary, or tertiary sources. So primary is like the first, secondary is the second, and tertiary is the third. Um, think about that first, second, and third as removed from the original. So a primary source is the original thing. A secondary source is what people say about that thing. And a tertiary source is just a collection of information that has already been reported. So primary sources are really strong. Um, Primary sources are the first iteration. If there's a study, the first time that that study has been published would be a primary source because that didn't exist in the world before. This is new information. Somebody did a study or did an experiment or ran an analysis, and now they're publishing their results for the first time. Other primary sources could be a work of art, a historical document, an autobiography, interview. So if you do an interview or you interview an expert, that's a primary source. Or if you're writing a literary research paper, the actual text that you're dealing with would be the primary source. Now, the secondary source is the discussion, interpretation, or analysis usually done by experts. So they take the raw data that has been produced and they talk about it. Um, Primary and secondary sources are your strong sources. These are the sources that I want you to use in your research. Tertiary sources, on the other hand, are things like encyclopedias, dictionaries, what we might call a digest of information that's already exists in primary and secondary form. I do not want tertiary sources. If you do use a tertiary source, you can use it, but it can't be one of your required sources. So if I require two sources, and you just have two tertiary sources, they're not going to count. Um, Now, sometimes we run into tertiary sources on the internet. So if you do a search and you pull up just sort of um, a website that just lists a bunch of facts and figures, or a website that has a bunch of bullet points. It's very surface. It's very just a catalog of what exists in other places. If you use a tertiary source, you want to look at the where did they get the information and go read it for yourself. So Wikipedia is a good example of a tertiary source. Wikipedia is just a collection of what other people have written. Now, you don't want to cite Wikipedia because anyone can post on Wikipedia. But as a researcher, you can use Wikipedia if you pay attention to the footnotes. So if you read a Wikipedia article, scroll down to the very bottom and actually access the footnotes, access the sources that are presented to you. And generally, those are going to be primary or secondary sources, and then research or report from those. So if I tell you that something is a tertiary source, it just means that it's more of a catalog or a digest of information that might be considered common knowledge or readily available. So you really want to do the extra work and track down those primary and secondary sources for your research. All right. So some of the uh, secondary and primary sources that are good for your research project are what we might call popular or scholarly periodicals. A periodical is just a fancy name for a magazine, so it just comes out periodically. Um, so popular and scholarly. Now, a popular publication is something that's out there for the entire world, maybe like Time Magazine or Newsweek, or the New York Times. These can be good sources depending on what you're using them for. But remember that a lot of these popular magazines and newspapers, the reporters are like 23-year-old um, journalists who have very little knowledge or experience, and they're just sort of doing research and talking to experts and reporting it back to you. So you can use these depending on the situation, but it's always a good idea if you read an article about a study, well, see if you can actually find the study and use that study as your source rather than the article about the study. Scholarly periodicals, these are the scholarly journals that you find in Galileo. Now, what separates a popular and scholarly periodical is that scholarly periodicals go through what they call a peer review process, where experts in the field review it before it's published. Popular periodicals may just have an editorial process. They might have a managing editor or something, which is good. An editing process is better than no editing process. You don't want to just go find somebody's blog and report that. Now, scholarly and what we might call professional periodicals are written for a smaller, more selective audience. And so they tend to go deeper. They tend to discuss things on a deeper level, whereas popular periodicals are more surface, more general information. So you want to gravitate more towards the professional or scholarly periodicals rather than the popular. Now, open web research, that means you're just, Googling. You have to be very careful because sometimes it's hard to assess the reliability or authoritativeness of what you're reading. A good example, a class that I had one time, um, I had a student writing a paper on combustion engines versus electric vehicles. And she found a website that was a car website, and it was sort of talking about this new battery that came out for a car battery. And she used this person as a source. And I asked her, I said, well, what do you know about this person? Are they an expert? Are they an engineer? Do they work for a car company? Um, and so we took the name and read about the person. Well, it turned out that it was a 14-year-old, um, hobbyist, just somebody who liked cars, and they were living in the United Arab Emirates, and they were like 14 years old. And I said, "Well, is that really an authoritative source?" And she kind of laughed and said, "Oh, well, I didn't really look." So you have to know who is writing this article and what makes them knowledgeable. If you can't establish that, if you can't establish why this is reliable information, then you shouldn't use it. So if you read something on the internet and it has no author, it's probably because it's a tertiary source. Um, that doesn't mean that you can't use it. You just have to establish its authoritativeness somehow. And as I've said, much of the best information is behind the paywall. So to avoid the paywall, use Galileo. Now, for your research projects, you might be looking at um, nonfiction sources because you're not writing a literary analysis. So, periodicals, government publications are good, business publications are good, documentaries, but mostly, you're probably going to be looking at studies, longitudinal studies, sort of catalog previous studies, or someone might do a new study. So finding those studies where people are reporting the results, those make very good sources because eventually you're going to use them to support an argument that you're making. And so, the idea is, well, you don't believe me, read the study, right? All right, so some databases that you might use to find these studies, and some of these are in Galileo, some of them are not. Academic Search Complete, Opposing Viewpoint, CQ Researcher, LexisNexis, JSTOR. A lot of these aren't in Galileo, but there are many more that are in Galileo. So you should be able to find everything you need. If you're having trouble finding what you need in Galileo, um, then it's okay to go out and into the open web, but just remember you have to be much more careful. All right, so let's say that you have gathered all of your information together. You think you have, okay, I have 4 or 5 really good sources that I think I can use. Um, so the hard part then is taking all of that information and condensing it and putting it in an order that works as an essay, that works as a composition, so that you can present it to someone in a way that makes sense. Um, so don't skip the pre-writing. Pre-writing always sounds like extra work, but it's really not because you're still working on your essay. You're just saving yourself a lot of time by pre-writing because otherwise you're sitting in front of a blank screen trying to do like 10 different things all at once. You're trying to organize your ideas, you're trying to express yourself, you're trying to cite. But what pre-writing does is it helps you to organize your ideas, get your ideas out before you worry about how you're going to present it or how you're going to cite. It just helps you to go ahead and get the meat and potatoes out there before you put on all the side dishes and you put it in a presentation and so on. So some pre-writing methods are journaling or free writing, just reflecting on what you think about the topic, what are your feelings about the topic. You're going to find that you can access this, you can use a lot of that in your essay, because I want to see you in the essay. I want to know what you think and what you think of this research and what you think of these ideas. Um, and then you present the ideas as well. Making lists. This is one that works well for me. I like to make lists. So what are the top 5 things I really want to talk about, and just list them out. You can do pros, cons, advantages, disadvantages. But remember, pros and cons, advantages and disadvantages, these are pre-writing strategies. These are not going to be the final way that you organize your essay. Have discussions with people. Say, well, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And try to figure out what other people think about your topic. If you're a very visual person, you might do clustering or mapping. And we're going to talk about outlining. This is another visual way. But organizing information visually helps you to make connections, but it also helps you to see what you have and what you don't have. So you can say, oh, I have a lot on this aspect of my essay, but I don't have a lot on that. I need to spend some time looking for things that those missing links. Um, Now, one thing for pre-writing too is what we call the bow tie method. And this will make more sense when I talk about, how to, how your introduction and your conclusion is organized. But with the bow tie method, it's just a way of working from left to right. So if you envision a bow tie, um, the wide part of the bow tie is the just your general discussion of your topic, and then as you move to the center of the bow tie, it narrows. So that means you're getting more specific, and then you're going to introduce your main idea, your thesis, and that would be the knot of the bow tie. And then at the end of your essay, you go from more specific to less specific again. And so if you're thinking of it in terms of from left to right, it's like a bow tie. Less specific general discussion, narrow it down to a specific main idea or thesis, and then, you know, develop those ideas in your body paragraphs. And then for your conclusion, go from the more specific back out to the general again. So that's kind of the basic way that you organize your composition. So outlining is probably the best way to visually um, organize your information, because it really does let you know, okay, what is the topic of each paragraph going to be? And how does that tie into my main idea? This is what we call unity in an essay. An essay has unity when the body paragraphs are all pointed towards showing or proving the main idea or the thesis. So that each body paragraph should have its own topic sentence that supports the main idea of the essay. People always ask me, well, how long should a paragraph be? And I say, well, a paragraph needs to be as long as it needs to be. And what I mean by that is, what is the purpose of your paragraph? You have to have a purpose for every paragraph, and you have to state that purpose at the beginning of your paragraph. This is what we call a topic sentence. So, however long it takes to develop the purpose for your paragraph, that's how long your paragraph is. So a paragraph is kind of like a mini essay in a way. It has a topic sentence, which is like a thesis statement. It has supporting sentences, which are like body paragraphs. And then it has a concluding sentence or a transition, which is like your concluding paragraph in an essay. So what an outline does is it helps you to visualize all of that. What am I going to do in my introduction, right? That would be Roman numeral 1. What is my plan for introducing my topic? What is my main idea, right? So I may say A might be my plan for introducing my topic, B might be my thesis. And then if I have details that go under that, I might use one, two, and then lowercase a and b. So what you're doing is you're creating a hierarchy of ideas for your essay. So that just might be one. Roman numeral two might be your first body paragraph. So what are the big ideas I'm dealing with in paragraph two? What are sort of the sub points that I'm making, and on and on. It seems like a lot of extra work, but actually, um, if you create an outline, you'll find that it's a map. When you sit down to write your final paper, you have a map to follow. It's like a cheat sheet. You're sort of creating a cheat sheet for yourself, so that when you sit down and write your essay, you just follow it. And so that's really important to organizing your information. Now, some tips on writing your first draft. So you've organized your ideas, you have a basic outline of what you want to say and how you want to say it. Um, the nice thing too about an outline is it liberates you to write your paper out of order. What that means is you might just want to get right down to it and write your most interesting paragraph first, and then that will be one of your body paragraphs. You might not write your introduction until last. So you don't have to write it in order, you just have to present it in order. So the introduction and conclusion are mostly going to be your thoughts. You might have some background information that gives context for your topic, something to gain the interest of your reader. Um, and then you want to narrow it down to your thesis statement. Your thesis statement, sometimes we use that term a little too loosely. A thesis is something you're trying to prove. So a thesis is something that fits more naturally into an argumentative essay. This is my opinion. This is what I feel about this topic. But you can also think of a thesis as your main idea of your paper. What is it that you're trying to show? What is it that you're trying to prove with your paper? So if you follow a basic formula for your thesis statement, you can't go wrong. And that would be state your topic. So what is my topic? State your claim. What is the main thing that you want to say about your topic? So if your topic is desserts, well, what are you saying about desserts, right? Um, the best desserts are cold desserts, or the best desserts are chocolate-based desserts, right? So desserts would be my topic. The fact that you think that some are better than others might be your claim. And then why do you believe that? Why do you think that? That's your reasoning. So in your thesis statement, try to state your topic, make a claim, and give your reasoning. Now, the reasoning will set the stage for your body paragraphs because your reasoning is what you break down in your body paragraphs. You expand on it, you explain yourself. Now, when you get to your conclusion, you want to paraphrase your thesis, so it means restate it, but in different words. Don't just copy and paste it. Refer back to the main idea because you're reminding the reader this was the reason you read this essay. Summarize your key ideas. So go back over the key points, and you're halfway there. And then the tricky part of a conclusion is thinking of a strategy for exiting your essay. So this is the other end of the bow tie, the wide end at the on the other side. So you could make clear the benefits of the new perspective that your thesis provides, point to new research or ideas to expand your investigation, explain how life can be improved, or why your point of view is important, or connect back to an anecdote or an example that you started in the beginning. These are all things you can do in your conclusion. I think about comedians. A lot of times they'll tell jokes, right? They'll come back to something that they started talking about at the beginning of the show, and then that everybody laughs, and it gives a sense of completeness. So you can do things like that with your essays. Now remember your body paragraphs. This is your reasoning, right? This is your Why do you think what you think? Show me. Show me your arguments. Show me your research, your quotes, your statistics. Give me the meat of the essay. All right, so just to recap, when you write an introduction, you want to go from broad, right, to general, and then introduce your main idea. So broad general statement, general introductory remarks, maybe some interesting facts or figures or something that's happened recently that speaks to your topic, and then state very clearly your main idea. Body paragraphs should be organized around a topic sentence, right? So think of it as the thesis of your paragraph. Ask yourself, what is the purpose of this paragraph? What am I trying to show in this paragraph? And then answer that question. Use that answer as your topic sentence. Now, the supporting sentences uh, in your paragraph, this is where you put all of your details. Develop the topic sentence. Show your work. Show your reasoning. Why do you think what you think? This is where you'll do most of your citation. And then a concluding or transition sentence, it signals the end of the paragraph and suggests what the next paragraph might be. So think about if you're an MC at a talent show, right? You might have a juggler and then you might have a unicyclist coming up after the juggler. A transition would be, wow, juggling takes a lot of hard work and coordination, doesn't it? You know what else takes a lot of hard work and coordination? Riding a unicycle. So you're pretty much connecting the previous thing to the next thing. So that's a good thing to do at the end of a body paragraph. All right, so just a little more information about topic sentences. It's the subject of your paragraph or your essay. So an example might be bananas are delicious, versatile, and nutritious. So the topic is bananas. The controlling idea is that they are delicious, versatile, and nutritious. So that controlling idea gives you an organizing principle for your body paragraphs. So I'm going to write one paragraph about the deliciousness. I'm going to write another paragraph about versatility. And I'll write a third paragraph about nutrition. And so if I stick to that, and the reader can see a connection between the body paragraphs and the rationale or controlling idea in the thesis, then your paper has what we call unity. And so I'm really looking for unity and coherence, because this shows that you have planned your essay. If your essay just rambles on and on and on and goes from one paragraph to the next, and there's no obvious organizing principle, that just means you didn't do pre-writing and you didn't organize your ideas. You're just sitting down and you're writing until you're done. And you're just not going to do as well on the essay if you do it that way. Now, what are the organizing principles that we're talking about in this class? Um, we're talking about those rhetorical modes. So we're saving argument for the third essay, and we're just focused on the second essay on just presenting our research and just discussing the issue. So you don't have to, argue for or against anything. I want you to save that for your third essay. So all you're doing is you're just saying, it's like a research report. This is what's out there. Now, use the organizing principles that we're discussing in our chapters. So you can do a comparison and contrast. You could talk about the similarities and differences of things in your topic. Cause and effect, if that's kind of you might talk about how there are multiple effects from a single cause or multiple causes that produce a single effect. You can define a term in a new and interesting way and then explain why you define it that way or why it should be understood differently. Now save your argument once again for essay 3. Some students make the mistake in essay 2, they turn in an argument. But then if you do that, then what are you going to do for essay 3? You can't turn the same essay in And if the two essays are too similar, I'm not going to accept it. So you really have to make sure that you're saving your argument for the third essay and that you're just presenting your research in the second. All right, so then we come to our conclusion. Um, you can write at any time, really, and just put it in there later. Um, I found when I write that I tend to write my body paragraphs first because I like to get to it. And then I find that the conclusion follows naturally um, when I'm done. And then I take a look at what I've done in my essay. What have I talked about? Because I am working from an outline, so I kind of know what my body paragraphs are about and I know where I'm going. But then it makes it a lot easier then to write an introduction. So my advice would be write your body paragraphs, write your conclusion, take a look at what you've done, and then write your introduction. So conclusions should once again summarize your main points, underline the importance of your topic, restate your thesis, and then don't say anything that contradicts your thesis or casts doubt on your main idea. That's not the place for it. Um, and then you have to have some sort of a parting thought, like looking to the future or reaffirming the importance of this topic, something like that. And that's sort of your exit from your essay. So hopefully you can see now that there's a relationship between research and writing. You're developing your ideas through your research. So the more you research and the more you learn, the more um, complex your ideas become. And then you have to present those ideas to your audience in a comprehensible way. And so you do that by having an introduction that introduces your main idea, elaborating and explaining yourself in the body paragraphs, and then having a sense of conclusion at the end. And that's what we call composition. So it is a process. It's a process of gathering information, learning from that information, organizing that information, and then expressing new ideas. All right, so I hope that was helpful, just to kind of give you an overview of what is the task when you're doing research. So I hope that if you've already started your research, which I hope you should have, um, that you're thinking about, how you can use those sources to find new sources, and that how you can keep learning and sharpening, what it is that you want to say and what you want to show. And then you can see how you just want to put it into a structure. And don't forget all those rules for citation. It's always a good idea to figure out how you're going to cite bibliographic and in-text while you're doing your research. Because when you get done with actually writing your paper, you're going to be exhausted and you're not going to feel like doing all that little nitpicky, detailed stuff. So it's good to do that as you go. All right. Well, I hope that was clear. And if you have any questions, please make sure and reach out.